Hello, you two. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. We're excited to chat you up.
It feels like it's a family reunion. Let's be honest.
It really does. I mean, we were talking off air about us meeting up in Glasgow when we were living there and going to the mobility cert in like 2011. I mean,
which is basically the dawn of time in the health and fitness world.
It really is. Things have changed so much. And I remember very well when I first stumbled upon what you were doing in your garage and sort of a mobility video a day. And this idea of bringing in, foam rollers or lacrosse balls and like doing shoulder stretches and mobility work and using bands, like it wasn't really a thing in the gym at the time. I mean, how do you feel like, is it weird when you take a look back and you think about we're in the garage and now like what the ready state has become?
Let me frame this for everyone. We went out on a tear and we were going to make a video a day for a year. And now that's not such a big deal because people make so much content and they film on their phones and you take selfies. So that has kind of changed a little bit, but I had written a poem a day for a year. And I was like, I think we can do this. And I think Juliet and I were like, we committed to trying to do this for the blog and we called it the Mobility Project. But who cares about all that? What I want everyone to know is that we had 2 children and Juliet was at the time, you may have been usurped, was the world record holder for internet stretching video cinematography. And it would be 10 o'clock at night and I'd be passed out because we'd been coaching all day or teaching. And Juliet would come home as an attorney. She'd be like, wake up. We got to make a video. And I'd be like, what? And like, we'd drag ourselves out to the garage at 10 PM to like make some content. So half of the time I have no idea, even if I'm awake, but we did it.
Well, and what I would add is that I have some skills as a person, but one of them is not being great at filming content, especially back then. I mean, it was just all so new and, I didn't really know how to use an iPhone and we didn't have any microphones. So the audio quality on our videos was always total shit. But I think the thing that, to me, sort of brings it all back and reminds me just how long ago that was, is how many people actually sometimes get a glimpse of our kids in some of our present day videos. And I think it actually sort of is a way to remind themselves about how much time has passed because, Georgia and Caroline will be in those videos and they're like 3 and 2 and 5 and jumping out of boxes in the background. And, now our daughter Georgia is about to go off to college next year. She's going to turn 18 in April. So, I mean, when I think
Caroline,
about it,
who was a preemie, is 5'10".
Yeah. So I think we, in some ways it has gone by so quickly. And then when I think about it from that perspective of like, wow, we've raised our children in the entire time since we started making those videos. So,
and to answer your questions, what's I think really remarkable is that when we started this idea, it was a pretty dangerous idea. And that idea was, you should be able to perform basic maintenance on yourself. If you're in pain, there's a lot you can do to get out of your pain. There's a lot you can do to affect your physiology that will affect your brain too. And so we really just said, hey, look at all these tools that we could democratize, that you don't need to talk to a professional person to be able to say, hey, I think I can make myself feel better. And honestly, at the time we were having a really dishonest conversation about, is pain a medical problem or not? And we were like sort of not even in the height of the opiate crisis and epidemic, but we told everyone pain is a medical problem. And we told every coach, you're not allowed to deal with pain. Pain is a medical problem. So people didn't address it. They kept showing up and they would have pain running and back pain working. And it was like, until their pain got so bad that they couldn't do their job or they had to go take a day off from work, go see a doctor and be referred to a physical therapist. And it was just like, there was so much low hanging fruit and slack in the system. We were like, well, hey, let's see if we just can move these tools out. And at the same time, we were clever enough to be in a community at the right time where we could transcribe what we knew were not just soft tissue mobilizations, but like when we developed all of the banded distractions and things, that was me trying to make it so that I can remove the physical therapist from the conversation. And we recognized that these things were safe And that if you could do them in your garage or your gym, you could own your position and own your body. And that apparently was a message that really resonated with people, because here we are later, and mobility is actually a word.
They were willing to watch our crap videos with horrible audio quality. So, I mean, there must have been something to them.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, it just from my perspective as an athlete going into the gym, and I've been an athlete my entire life. And it wasn't until I really got into that CrossFit space and first learned about Mobility Project and was watching your early videos and starting to take those things into the gym. I mean, I had, when I was racing mountain bikes, tremendously bad back pain. I mean, so many things going on with my body. And it was sort of like, well, where do you go? What do you do? And it felt really empowering to say, well, you know, I can at least, like you said, use these things to get into better positions, own your position, that sort of thing. And it really did make a big difference for me personally. So, and as a coach, did you make people mad though along the way? I'm curious, like, were people sort of like, wait a minute, like, why are you taking us out of the equation with this? Or was it all really smooth sailing?
I mean, Kelly should really take this in earnest, but I will say, being on the sidelines of, you know, Kelly being from and trained as a physical therapist, I think he has had moments where he feels a great kinship with the greater physical therapy community, and moments where he's like, I don't even think I am a physical therapist. Like, what I do bears no resemblance to that. So I think it's been, you know, a really up and down experience for him in terms of sort of his connection to that greater physical therapy community. But I mean, I will say from my outside perspective, you know, I actually think most physical therapists actually haven't, and the good ones don't feel threatened at all by the kind of work we're trying to do. Because I don't think that anything we've ever done is cutting them out altogether. There's definitely a time and a place for professional help and professional assistance. But, you know, I think there's probably, I don't know, what would you say? Do you think you made people mad?
I would say that the problem is, oftentimes people can't wrap their heads around the two truths about what do we do. One is our objective measures are, what is it every human being should be able to do with her shoulder, their shoulder? And those things are established not by me, but by physical therapists and physicians and orthopedists and American Academy of Pediatric, you know, pediatricians. And what we see is that around the world, everyone agrees this is how much shoulder range of motion and extension you should have. This is how much shoulder range of motion, putting your arm over your head and flexion you should have. So our objective measure always was to take mobilizations. And if you looked at Supple Leopard, it was the first 2/3 of the book is movement and movement theory and how to integrate and see the patterns underneath those things, not just discrete step aerobics that I memorize, but what does the principle say about a better way of higher expression of the movement? And then the back half are a set of tools, which are mobility tools. And the reason we went to mobility tools, as in mobilizations, as you call them position transfer exercises, was that we found that when people started doing things in greater range of motion, standing up, things that look like real strength conditioning, pull-ups, push-ups, kettlebell swings, deadlifts, lunges, we didn't need a lot of corrective exercises. Corrective exercise came out of a tradition where people were doing a lot of cable crossovers and a lot of functional things, quote unquote, functional things, balancing on a physio ball. And they weren't really exposed themselves to really the language, the formal language of strength conditioning. And what we found was we had in that language regression and progression. So if you couldn't squat, we didn't stop squatting and do a bunch of squat-like things. We just squatted higher or squatted shallower or had you hold the weight in a different place.
Right, or move more slowly.
Right, or moved your feet in and out. But we still did the thing. And so what we found was that we had this really powerful tool, regression, progression. We had an objective set of measurements. Why can't you do this? Your ankle is supposed to do this. You don't have any internal rotation. So that really is the first sort of objective. And if people didn't understand that, then that's our error for not explaining that as well, right? Because it wasn't just stretch until you end up stretching, then your legs are behind you. And there's actually an end range. Like, this is how much you should do. And now we can create vital signs of movement sort of limitations. Like, you don't need to work on this anymore. But the other part of our equation which I think confused people, was that we were always about biomotor output, which is shorthand for wattage, poundage. Can you go faster? And because we were working in communities where people were challenging and still are challenging those things, when we put people into native ranges and gave them expression and permission to own what their body should be able to do, they went faster, they lifted more, they ran further, they were more efficient, they won world records. And that was the two kind of twin markers there. Do you have native range? That native range gives you increased wattage. Go ahead and come at us. Like, you don't like our styles and techniques, that's fine, but you can't argue that your shoulder extension is incomplete. And so I think those two things, and oftentimes we were a little ahead of the curve. And so people have come to understand what we meant. It's just taken a long time for people to understand. And I've even heard really legit strength coaches say things like, oh, I got into jiu-jitsu, I should have paid attention more to my mobility and my range of motion. Now, I didn't realize it when I was powerlifting. And I think that's valid, right? At the powerlifting, you're like, hey, it's not a full range of motion sport. Why am I spending all this time working on my hip rotation when it doesn't change my function?
Yeah, as a jiu-jitsu player for the last 6 years, I can appreciate that quite a bit as well. And I appreciate your candor there, because I think, you all have been in this space for a long time, and you've really developed this amazing way of communicating what you do. You have such a great library of resources. You have such a great methodology. And, when you are on that leading edge of things, sometimes I feel like it just, people don't always understand. They're not always ready. And so I think, just kind of from one person who's been in the space for a really long time to you all, it's cool to see how you've stuck with what you know to be true. Like, you've adjusted over time, and if you learn new things, you go there, and you've really just also really, I think, stayed true to your values, to who you are, and to your mission, which is commendable in such an industry, especially the online space of this industry, where things come and go and pop up and go away. And to really have that staying power is very impressive.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, somehow, somewhere in our lives, like, we both jointly got the message that people who are great at anything just do the same thing over and over and over. And it's not to say that they don't evolve and iterate, they do, but they're kind of doing the same thing over and over and over and over. And that's how you become great at something. And so, obviously, like, our website looks different, and we have, we provide our products in different ways, and, we're evolving and iterating what we're doing and how we're thinking about things. But I mean, we've really been in this exact same lane now for, 15 or 20 years. And our core message is, really exactly what Kelly said at the beginning of this, which is, we just want to give people some tools and tricks to be able to take care of their bodies, and that they should be able to do that's like, a right as a human being. And, that's been kind of our guiding principle throughout. And, we've stayed in our lane.
The thing is, we discovered is that, people are going to get hot. We heard this great interview one time. Someone was describing, people who are hot.
It was Jay-Z.
And he's like, don't get confused with excellence. Is people are hot. So certainly in the last 10 years, but longer, 15 years, we've seen a lot of people get hot, and then they go away. And it's okay for us to say, wow, that person's killing it, and really say, I appreciate that. I hope they can stick around. I hope they have something else to say. And what we have continued to find is that we have a lot more to say, and we have really smart, interesting friends. And in this space, as Juliet said, there's a lot of room to expand the message, to say, hey, look, I don't think, as we're learning now, that the promise of fitness has really been sort of met. We really, let's just say how much money and time we've all spent in the last decade professionalizing fitness. And if I turn around and we apply that saying, or looking at that filter across humanity, I'm not sure we've really served the people. We've really gotten good at basically creating like small, we're like university faculties fighting over minutia about history. There's a technical term for that called artifacts of scholarship. And what ends up happening is that the rest of the real meaningful work goes by, and needs aren't met. So I think what we're realizing is, hey, performance was so great, and that's where we learned our craft, but we need to have a bigger conversation about reaching into our neighborhoods and our families and say, hey, look, you can feel better, and you have to take this systems approach to begin to feel better. And it's actually your right and in your power to do so.
And just to add, I mean, that's sort of how, again, like Kelly said, we got our roots in, we were both professional athletes and working in high performance environments. But sort of every step we've taken over the last 10 years is to figure out, how can we cast a wider net? How can we bring more people into the tent so that more people can take advantage of these tools that we've been able to create and have access to by way of having so many amazing friends in the space? And like our first step of that was actually changing our name from Mobility WOD to the Ready State. That was a key part of this sort of transformation that we've had, because we just felt like Mobility WOD was not an open and accessible word to, the vast majority of humanity. And we didn't want, people to get tripped up on the possibility by just saying like, I don't relate to the word mobility. It's still niche and weird. And I definitely don't relate to the word WOD. That's definitely weird. And so it's been these little baby steps we're taking to figure out like, how can we cast a wider net and make some of this work we're doing more accessible?
I love that. I think it's amazing. And I know it's not easy also when you're doing what you're doing. So huge kudos to y'all there. Take me through sort of so you have several books, and sort of take me through really quickly, like the progression, the evolution of these texts, even to sort of where you're at now with the new book, Built to Move. Like, how is it, like, if we had to kind of follow the timeline, what was the idea behind how it's changed?
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about lately, actually, after Built to Move is, out in the world, is that in many ways, I think of it actually as a prequel to Becoming a Supple Leopard. We just weren't sophisticated enough, and we didn't have enough like reps and hours and experience in the business to be able to appreciate that. To me, Becoming a Supple Leopard is like, is like the advanced course. And this book is the prequel to it. So, that's sort of the way I think about it. What do you think?
First of all, I do not recommend anyone write a book ever.
It's the worst. In the best, bad. But it's also,
yes.
I think about, just to interrupt you for 1 second, because this sticks in my mind anytime somebody's like, but you should write a book. And I've got a few. So it's like that scene from Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, Boromir. They are in Rivendell and they're about to go out, right? And he's like, nobody just walks into Mordor. Like, you don't just walk into Mordor. And I'm like, yeah, you don't just write a book.
One does not.
And we're huge Lord of the Rings fans, so I couldn't appreciate that story more.
Nerd segue. Okay, back to
this is why this couple is. I pay attention to them. Yes. They speak the same language. I think what's interesting is you can see that we're thinking, all right, performance, the basics, moving into kind of some sports, but also some public health. We're realizing that, we need to take on with Deskbound, and then we write a book about running, we write a book about paddling. And this is actually our 6th book. And we even tried self-publishing one, Juliet,
which I don't strongly do not recommend.
Again, passion project. It was our love letter to paddling. And I think we've sold tens of those books. It was such a good use of everyone's time. Shout out to tens. Those of you who own it, I appreciate you. But what we've come to realize is that actually there was a little bit of a revolution, because everything went online and digital and became so hyper local on people's phones. But there's something missing about people who aren't on the internet. And there are actually a lot of people who aren't on Instagram. So those of us on Instagram are like, Instagram is this life. And we even felt like, those TikTokers, like those are little children over here, and I'm an adult. I wait until memes make it to, Instagram, and then I laugh at them, right? So I think one of the things we realized was that the power in the book, we saw that the Supple Leopard transformed our lives. It became a textbook. I think it sold 750,000 copies. And so you see that thing is out there, and still, people are using it as a base text resource, primary source. But Becoming a Supple Leopard and some of the books don't actually tell you what to do or how to live, or what do I do first thing in the morning, or what does it look like in a day? And if I'm a busy person, what's essential? So one of the things that we figured out was, again, in this idea of these objectivity, it's not enough to say it's good enough. We recognize, especially in the pandemic, that people could be comfortable with understanding what their respiration rate was, understanding what their oxygen saturation was, their temperature. Those are all vital signs. And what we did in this book was we were like, well, if people can start to become sophisticated about really nuanced physiology, vital signs, why can't we take that same concept and apply it to physicality, apply it to behavior? So what we've tried to do in this next book, Built to Move, is say, hey, look, this is the learning manual. This is the place off of which we can create and build the next level. And so if Supple Leopard is missing a heart, this is it. I mean, this is what did we come up with? Like I said the other day, in a fit of I blacked out. And I was like, it's like the Jumanji beating hearts, the drum beat of the Supple Leopard heart. And the idea here is we need to reach more people, and we need to simplify the message. It's not diet and exercise. Everyone knows they need to diet and exercise. And yes, you need to exercise. And yes, you should watch what you're putting in your mouth. But we realized that needed to be a component to a bigger whole, and that we needed to take this systems approach. And it was the same systems approach that we were taking with all of our elite athletes. So whether we're doing one-offs with the best athletes in the world and talking about fueling and down regulation, or working with, we have 2 teams right now cruising into, some football, who have done really well with our programming on their athletes. Their coaches have all gone through our stuff. What we see is that those lessons we needed to take out and say, okay, how do we objectify them? How do we make these measurements that everyone can start to understand? They're like, oh, here's a baseline. And it's not good or bad. It's, okay, here's where I am. And now I have some understanding into how my body's working, so that when something pops up, or I have knee pain, or I'm starting to gain body weight, or I'm not sleeping, or I'm stressed, or blood panel starts, I start to have some measures that I can wrap my hands around, which gives me agency and control. And the book is an easy way to do that, because it's not online, it's not digital.
And if I could just add a couple of things, I think there were like sort of a few things that really informed our readiness to be able to write a book like this. The first is, spending, like I'm sure you do, the last 15 years, like self-experimenting. Like I am not an expert in any of these things, other than that I've been in the health and fitness space for a lot of years, and I've had access to all the most amazing tools and tricks and coaches and coaching, and I've been coached. And we've really been experimenting on ourselves and have come to sort of realize that there's this core set of behaviors that we do in our own lives over and over and over and over and over again. And it's what we think has made us durable humans. The second thing is while we do have a lot of friends in the health and fitness wellness space at large, we've got a couple kids. We're raising them in a community of people. We have friends who are busy working parents, or just busy working people, who are trying to navigate this. And what we've seen happen over the last 10 years is people feeling literally fire hosed with information from our industry, and they don't know how to make heads or tails of it. I mean, the amount of conversations I have just among parents of our kids, friends, or people in the neighborhood, neighbors across the street, they want to know whether they should be keto or paleo, or whether it's time for them to start intermittent fasting. And wait, should I CrossFit now, or should I do F45? Should I hike? Should I do this? Wait, should I prioritize sleep, or is that not really that important? And, wait, what do I do? And, oh yeah, hey, Kelly, I got to come over tonight because I threw out my back. And so we're living in this, like real community where people look to us for advice on these subjects. And so we realize that informally, we've been kind of doling out advice over the years, and realizing that everybody is sort of missing what we call these Basecamp practices, that we have so many people we know. And this includes, by the way, a lot of professional athletes and high performers that we work with. They're like, the analogy we like to use is they're actually trying to climb up Everest, but they've never made it to base camp. And what I mean by that is, they're taking like a litany of complicated supplements that they read about on Instagram, and, they're following some niche diet, or, they're doing some secret squirrel exercise program or whatever, but like, they're not sleeping at night, and they can't report the last time they ate a vegetable. And, they keep struggling on and on with shoulder pain all the time that they can't seem to resolve despite having 57 MRIs and, their doctor saying, well, you don't have a catastrophic injury, so you should just stop moving. And so we've sort of spent the last 10 years in this universe of like self-experimentation and then being part of a bigger community of people who know that they want and need to be healthy, whatever that means. They want to feel good, and they're struggling to feel like they can get solid, actionable advice.
You just killed that.
Oh, thanks.
I'll just sit down quietly from now on. Well done, my lady.
Yeah, it's so true. And I get these DMs all the time as well. Should I eat 25 grams or 30 grams of carbs after my workout? And I'm like, okay, we need to like back it up a second here. There's a whole lot that is probably more fundamental and important to do consistently rather than stressing out about those tiny little details. And I really love how you have these 10 kind of key things here in the book to really get people focused on the things that are going to move the needle the most.
So let me ask you a question. You saw those 10.
Yeah.
Which ones was any on there that were surprising to you?
I don't think I would say surprising, just what I know of you all and the Ready State and all the things that you've, created content around over the years. But I think one stood out to me as being very underrated by the general public. And this comes down to, anytime somebody comes to me for coaching and they're like, I just, I'm ready, I want help. And we're talking about systems and structures and habits. And the one thing that nobody wants to think about or talk about is the environment. So in this list, number 9, where you had creating a movement-rich environment, I think that's hugely overlooked. And I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about that. What do you mean?
I'll start by telling you a funny story because there's an ongoing fight in our household about who came up with that phrase. Although I know it's me and not Kelly. But anyway, we're always like TM, movement rich environment.
Did you see? I didn't even flinch. I just was like, she's going to take it in this podcast. You can own movement rich environment.
She ran with it. She ran with it.
It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've seen, and we talked about it a bit in our book Deskbound, but maybe not as well as we could have, is that we've just set up our environments universally to dissuade enough movement in our days. And also technology has been a huge component of that. I mean, you add on, we already had a lot of, environmental constraints that encouraged us to not move before technology. And then technology was just like, the final nail in the coffin, and it's difficult. I mean, we're all, maybe less so since COVID. That's been a positive development. People aren't commuting as much. So maybe people aren't spending as much time in their cars. But I'm not sure that's actually helped people move more. I think people are like getting up from bed and going directly to their Zoom calls in their PJs. But we just haven't created an environment that allows for enough movement. And I think what we've really realized about ourselves and about humans is that we're all inherently lazy, and we need to take out.
Let me take it back.
Yeah.
We're not lazy. We're designed to conserve energy.
And if we put ourselves in an environment where there's a comfy couch and a huge bowl of cookies, like, I don't care who you are, you're going to be like, yes, I am. And yes, I will. Right. And so we are always trying to do in our own lives, and has worked really well for us, is this thing we call constraining our environment. And the other thing we do is pepper our environment. There are these like 2 things we do. So one example of constraining our environment, as you can see, we have our podcast table here, and it's a non-adjustable standing height table. And we have some stools here, so we're not requiring ourselves to stand 24 hours a day. I'm actually standing right now. Kelly's sitting. But if you
I'm perching, my feet are on the ground.
But if I had no idea, just based on looking at you, by the way, that you weren't sitting. So
yeah, I'm standing right now. Yeah, I'm standing. And actually I have my foot up on a little bar below the thing, but I'm standing here. But just by having this table here, this is the choice we have. This is where we work. Every desk in our office is standing only. So you can sit at a stool, but you're at least given the option to get up and down and spend 20 minutes, 15 minutes of your day standing. So you're being given these constrained choices. And the other thing we do about our environment is we pepper our environment. And I'm sure your living room looks like ours. I'm sure you are peppering your environment, but like our living room is set up so that we love to watch Netflix. Like we just talked about this before we, press record on this. Like we love TV and movies and we find that that's a great way to relax at night. But if you go into our living room, you'll see that we have balls and rollers and Normatec boots and, hypervolts and, little pads that you can sit on so you can spend time sitting on the ground. And in our kitchen, we have slack blocks because we're big fans of practicing balance, but we don't want to have like a balance practice per se. And so everywhere you look in our house, they're like easy ways.
And hey, we have a rad mid-century modern house. Yeah. So we're clear. So it doesn't have to we're not like,
it doesn't look like a jungle gym
furniture. That's right.
No, it doesn't look like if you came in, our kids aren't embarrassed.
The Kabuki pain pill is this huge, gigantic 45-pound stainless steel object. It's like a modern mid-century object. People, well, what's that? I'm like, put it on your quads. Tell me what it's for. And, it's just in the living room as an object and it's beautiful. So I'm just telling you, you don't have to suffer.
I mean, this is just a long way around of saying like, everybody knows the old saying where it's like, if you have cookies in your house, you're going to eat the cookies. Well, we are basically trying to take that same principle and apply it to our environment so that at every chance we have to add in little movement snacks, little balance practices, a little bit of mobilization while we're watching the TV. Like there's no barrier to us doing that because we have the tools there. We've made it comfortable for ourselves. It's easy to do. Our kids do it. And so, that's one of the things we've been really focused on. So I'm glad you picked that up.
And let me jump in and say that, as a young physio at school, working alongside the occupational therapist, when someone had a stroke, cerebrovascular accident, and they had sort of diminished capacity on one side, one of the things that I would watch them do is they would actually put a cooking mitt on the less affected side. So right side's affected, more affected, left side's, let's say, less affected. It's the correct term. And they would put a mitt on the less affected side, on the side where people had more dexterity. And they would make the more affected side do all the work. And so they would take away the option and the choice to be able to grab it with the less affected side. So if you really want to develop your left-handedness, just stop using your right hand, but make it a non-choice, put a glove on so you can't touch anything, put a mitten on. That's what I'm talking about. And that really changed and stuck my brain. I was like, oh, it's a lot easier if I don't have a choice, or I make it so the choice is more in my favor to do a different thing, not a better thing, but a different thing. I expand my choices. And I think the power of this book is not only for us identifying what clear objective measures are for behavior, but because, as you mentioned earlier, we're 50 years old, we have 2 kids, we have a business. We're not like 20-year-olds spending Sunday meal prepping. That just doesn't work for us. And we've started to view all of our behavior modifications through the lens of when and where are people going to be able to do this? How do they fit this in? We saw, because we've been in this performance space, I've gone into countless professional teams. I mean, just choose a professional team in a sport. And the people before me have come in with these really immaculate programs, and no one does them because they don't know how to fit it in. It doesn't fit into the existing architecture. It's a whole different language. So what we've tried to do, and as a result, no one does their stuff. And so I learned that lesson early on. If I was going to get people to do my stuff and to experience the beauty and the magic that is my brain, was that obnoxious? What I needed to do is say, well, how can I help you solve your problems in the time that you have allotted for it? And that really changed my perspective about what was essential is not. And so if you take this book, you'll see that we look very clearly at when is an average person, a typical person, going to have any agency and control over their life, and when do you fit these practices in? Otherwise, it's just one more thing I give to a busy working mother. And I'm like, hey, check this box off the list, right? Now you've got more things to do.
Like one of the things I think, like one of the chapters I like a lot in this book, I like them all, but one of them I like a lot is the balance chapter. And the reason I think it's so important is I think sort of intellectually everybody knows that they want to maintain their balance. And I think everybody has heard.
We ski, we stand up, paddle, we bike.
I think everybody's heard that like you know, if you fall down when you're old, like it's kind of the beginning of the end. Like most people have probably heard that like through some sort of source in their life, right? So people know that. I think sort of people know at a basic level that balance is important. And maybe naturally through some kind of sport or activity, like we ride our mountain bikes and do some stuff, we naturally get some balance practice, but most people don't. But if you, again, ask a busy person who has a lot on their plate to be like, hey, take this 1 hour balance class on top of your workout and the 50 other things that we in the fitness business have prescribed that you do in your day, zero chance that's going to happen. Will not happen. Like that's going to be the thing that people are, you know, everybody's got to make a priority list. That's going to be crossed off. But to me, it's one of the most important things that we want to maintain as we get older. And as I've watched my own parents age and sort of thought about what is it that I want to be able to do when I'm, you know, 55, 60, 75, 80, you know, how do I still want to be able to use my body?
Dude, 78, that's for men.
Like
78.
one of those, yeah, like balance is definitely at the top of that list, but it's not sexy to practice balance. And so, you know, we've tried to do some things in this book that like incorporate adding a little bit of mini balance practices throughout your day, doing things you're already doing, like putting on your shoes and socks and brushing your teeth and, you know, standing around cooking dinner or doing the dishes. I mean, we've tried to really make it so that it's not just one more thing that you have, because if we said to 99.9% of people like, oh yeah, balance is important, and if you want to maintain your balance, you need to do this 1 hour balance class every day, literally people would be like, oh yeah, no, there's no way I'm doing that.
And more importantly, we've also given you some objectives, and if you can pass these objectives, and you're thinking to yourself, maybe that's less of a priority right now, maybe I can put my energy somewhere else. But now, because we've given you a vital sign, and the vital sign is very clear, the research is very clear, if you can't stand on one leg with your eyes closed for 20 seconds, you are at increased fall risk and mortality and morbidity. Like it is real that is an easy benchmark. And it's also begin to say, well, even practicing the test is going to make you better at the test. But if you didn't even know it was something to be aware of, and then Juliet says, like we point out in the book, hey, do you wear shoes? Perfect. Stand on one leg, put a shoe on. Stand on the other leg, put your shoes on. Let me know how that goes for you. Oh, you just did balance every day for the rest of your life. That's what we're after. You know, we figured out, and it's a saying around here, that you have to be consistent before you're heroic. Really, truly. I mean, if you can start to wrap your head around that, and then put this in the background, we're not talking about giving up Peloton or giving up the things you like. We're just saying, hey, look, let's create some touch points that we think and have seen and are tested in our world travels and all the things we're doing that we know make durable people. And by durable, we're talking about people who feel good and people can do what they want to do. That's the game. Not necessarily just like prepping with your fitness.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you have structured the book that way. It's the thing I hear so much from my clients, the people in my audience, my community members is, yeah, they feel like taking care of their bodies just becomes this extensive to-do list. And as much as they like the dopamine of checking off the checkbox, yes, it just ends up being this thing that feels it's resentful. It's like, I have to do all these things in addition to the things that I'm already doing. I already don't have a lot of time or sort of free time to just relax. And people are really kind of stretched to the max these days. And to weave that in, I mean, we still don't have a couch. We got rid of our couch probably 2014 or 15. So we still don't have a couch. We sit on the floor a lot. We've made it fairly comfortable to do so. But we still have all of our, rollers and our, all of our mobility balls and supernovas and all that stuff on the floor. And it's just, when it's there and can be woven into the things that you're already doing, I feel like it's less of an ask, I guess, than let me put this just long list of things that you need to do beyond, you're trying to exercise, trying to eat fairly well, trying to get enough sleep, all of those things.
And still trying to have time to be a human.
Yeah.
One of the things that we sort of struggle with two identities. One is we recognize in our high performance environments, some of the university teams we're working with, for example, that they're not outworking the competition. That narrative that we'll just outwork everyone, grind everyone. What a bunch of horse crap that is. That's totally horse crap. Everyone is working as hard as you're working. what we've seen is the real advantage, obviously, is talent makes a difference. But besides that, whoever can adapt to doing the most work actually wins. That means that they can handle more work volumes more often, more frequently, and be fresher. So if everyone's working the same amount, but you have one set of people who are prioritizing sleep, who get some, are walking and decongesting, who are kind of taking care of their tissues and eating enough proteins, et cetera, we see is that group does a better job of adapting to the stressors in their world, which means that they can work harder. And what everyone should hear in this message is primarily, you actually think you're working really hard, but you can actually feel better and do even more. And that's the message that we come in. I'm like, oh, I know you think you're really, really working hard, but you're not. And as soon as you do these things, you can actually start to work really hard. And that ends up being such a differential. And simultaneously, we really keep an eye on the fact that we want people to be not robots, not athletic robots, that if all you're doing is counting your pills and got to do 26.2 seconds in your hyperbaric chamber, and then you do this red light therapy, and then you're a robot. You need to go into your community, hang out with your family, be of service and of use. And if all of your thing is in this, then you're not really an athlete, right? You're a person who's on an unsustainable quest. And that might be temporarily, you can do that. We saw that with some of our best CrossFit athletes, where they just become monks temporarily and they're like, okay, I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. Right. But we're talking about what does it look like for a long haul. So simultaneously, we think you can work harder and get more done if you can adapt to the stresses in your life more effectively through these Basecamp practices. And simultaneously, we want to bury them into your routine so no one even knows you're doing it. You're just sitting on the coffee table, mobilizing your hamstrings in the evening before you go to bed, watching TV. That's the thing we're talking about. We call it hiding the reps.
And I think this is, I think hopefully we've tried to strike this balance well. I mean, as being in this business, you can't do nothing. Right. So doing nothing is not an option if we, want to be durable humans and feel good and, not struggle with nagging pain and injury and, all the things we're hoping to avoid as a motivator to have some kind of like health and wellness practice. But I also think that so much of it can just be these little things, little moments incorporated into our lives that actually can have, done consistently, can have this massive change. And, so I hope that's kind of the balance we've struck. Like, you can't read this book and osmote the information. You do actually have to do a few things. But I mean, we have, we have tried so hard to say, hey, look, like it's just these little stacking behaviors you can add into your life. And I'm sure you've seen this too. I mean, one of the things you see, and I sometimes see it in myself. I mean, it's, I think something we all battle as humans is that you're like, well, if I can't do the whole thing, I'm going to do nothing. Mm-hmm. And so
diet's gone. Bring out the ice cream.
Right. And that is true for movement and exercise and, all the little things that, we're suggesting that people do. And so, our very last chapter is the only chapter where we talk about exercise. And thanks to our friend Dave Spitz from Cal Strength, we named it Never Do Nothing. But I mean, that really is our mantra, and the mantra that we want to have. We hope people take away from this book is never do nothing. Because, look, if you've had a crazy busy day and we have to travel for work and, sometimes all we literally have is 10 minutes to do something. And so of these 10 practices we're talking about, like we may get to choose one, but man, again, over a lifetime compounded, and some days you're going to have time to do 8 and some days you'll have time to do 10, but over a lifetime, these little mini behaviors really do compound to be like massive amounts of money in the bank. It's like a 401k.
Yeah, absolutely. Very compounding over time. And I really appreciate that about what y'all do, is that reminder that even if you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's not wasted. It still counts. And I still hear this so often from even, everywhere from the recreational exercisers in the community to the more elite or competitive athletes and everyone in between, is this feeling like we're never doing enough. We're never doing it good enough. We're not doing it for long enough. It's just like, it's never enough. And of course that would be just so demotivating over time that you tend to fall into that black and white thinking of, if I can't do my hour and really go smash it and go hard on back squats today, then what, there's nothing to do. And I love how you all are taking up the torch, I guess, to say, in the other side of this, which is, everything, every little bit counts. And recently we did a challenge in my group coaching program. I know you all did a walking challenge recently as well. And it was like, just do something intentionally for movement every day. I was like, I don't care what it is. It could be, little movement snacks. It could be you go walk for 10 minutes. It could be just do some, I don't know, foam rolling, whatever you want. But people really were like, that helped take the edge off of this constant feeling like I'm never going to match up. I'm not doing it perfectly enough. And I'm just always falling behind. And that's no way to look at that.
No, the Peloton ad is, if I'm not getting cheered on and crushed, and then my life isn't going to be good, and you do bring up such a wonderful point around this. And, I think if we can have a baseline on some of these things, then it also recognizes that when you're like, whoa, I've just fallen below the baseline. So let me just give you an example in our own lives. Juliet was just on the East Coast for a work trip, and her sleep wasn't great. She flew to Louisiana for a work trip, and she would text me and be like, my sleep. Oh, look at my sleep. And the idea here is, for example, one of our vital signs is sleep. And one of the things that we want people to understand is that human beings need 7 hours of sleep for survival. That's our benchmark. And so now you have this threshold where you're like, oh, I've just been falling below the 7 a lot. I got to just prioritize some things better to get above that survival. And then we think if you want to change your body composition or grow or get out of pain or learn a new skill or
right.
develop,
be awesome at your job,
you need 8 hours of sleep. And so that means that you can start to make big boy and big girl decisions. I'm not going to get any sleep, but I'm going to go binge this movie, and that's totally okay. But now I have a benchmark behavior so that you can come right back onto if you need it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, sometimes we stay up late every once in a while, and I'm always like, oh, I know I'm going to pay for this. I saw a meme about this today. It was like the feeling when you stay up late is like, ha ha ha, like, yes. And then the next day it's like, oh, why?
Yeah, you're like, we saw the a funny sleep meme recently too, where it was like, remember when you were, now it's like we have this 27 things we do so we can get a good night's sleep. But remember when you were like 25, you could just sort of lay down anywhere and fall asleep. And we long for those days.
But so you guys, you bring up this other thing about the sleep. And one of the things that I really like about the book is how recursive it is, and how these, you heard Juliet say it in kind of a offhand way, but these behaviors stack. So one of the things that we know from working with some of our elite military units is that when we had people with really bad disordered sleep, and they have some of the most disordered sleep in all of our world. In fact, we've been in enough places where Ambien is literally a performance enhancing drug. And they'll take 2 Ambien, sleep for 4 hours, take 2 more Ambien, and then wake up. And then after you take all that Ambien, I don't know what you do. You have to take a bunch of Adderall. Oh, I'm describing world-class pitchers in the Major League Baseball, right? This isn't made up. This is firsthand knowledge. But one of the ways that we untangled that was to increase step count. And so by increasing people's step count, so these are some of the best freakish people on the planet who are like military ninjas, but they weren't falling asleep or getting fatigued, but they were training hard. But their total activity for the day wasn't sufficient to induce sleep stress and sleep debt. So they actually felt the pressure to go to sleep. And so by increasing people's step count, lo and behold, you're actually tired enough that you want to go to bed. And that for people, we're like, hey, if you have a sleep problem, you got to start walking. And by the way, that starts to mean that you maybe need to lay off the caffeine a little bit earlier. And so suddenly having these vital signs means you can start to organize some of your behaviors, and inputs and outputs aren't so hidden from you. And all of these things start to snap together in a really amazing way. For example, go ahead and be sleep deprived and then close your eyes and stand on one leg. Watch what happens to your balance. Mm-hmm. Watch what happens to your ability to make good decisions, like eating fruits and vegetables and protein versus reaching for things that don't rhyme with fruits and vegetables and protein.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me really quickly about what are some of your favorite ways, because we're talking about how busy people are, right? People are so busy. And sometimes on Instagram, and this makes me want to poke my eyes out, I see people are like, 15K steps a day minimum. And I'm like,
whoa,
we gotta just slow the fuck down a little bit here.
Yes.
Like if you have, cause I don't know about you all, but for me to walk a relatively vigorous, like 10K steps is going to be over an hour. So if we're talking about 10 to 20K steps a day, that's a long period of time.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite suggestions you have for people to start weaving this in? Because I think, again, it's like one of those things people know. Yeah, okay, my stupid walk for my stupid mental health and like all these other stupid things, a stupid walk. I know it's good for me. And I think people actually do want to do it. But how do you find that time?
Especially if you start with you have to do 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
And
so
you're
I
like,
mean,
when am I
we actually lowered the number to 8,000 based on some research that shows that that's actually an attainable number for the vast majority of people, and that you get the same. 10,000 was just an arbitrary number that was created at some point by who knows who, and didn't really have any meaning. And yes, of course, like if you have the time and capability in your life to walk 15,000 steps, like high 10 to you, but that's not most people.
Or if 8 or 10 isn't getting you sleepy enough.
What we know is that most people are getting like 3,000, and that 8,000 might actually be attainable for a lot of people. And so we really try to give people a lot of strategies and tools and tips to just figure out how to add more steps. And, let me tell you how I do it. Because I don't have an hour on most days, especially not work days, to go for a walk. On the weekends, I do try to actually go for a more like an actual walk. But, I usually exercise early in the morning, and I actually try to walk around the block after I exercise as a cool down. So I try to sort of incorporate it into that. And that's all happening within the 1 hour, right? So I'm still like under an hour, including my block walk, which is like between 600 and 800 meters. And it's probably like 16 or 1700 steps. Then I try to take a couple of walking meetings throughout my day, because I'm stuck on Zoom all the time. And I've learned that, actually some of those meetings, I don't need to be on video, and I can just put my headphones in and walk. And actually I find when I'm walking and talking, I'm like my most alert and creative self. So I'm actually better in meetings if I'm walking a little bit. And the other thing we recommend is go take a 10-minute walk actually after all your meals. I mean, that's the other thing. You actually can accumulate like 1,000 steps in 10 minutes. And, so you take some 10-minute walks after your meals, you take one walking meeting for half an hour, 45 minutes.
And remember, it doesn't have to be walking. It can also be moving. So if this whole time we've been talking, Juliet has been fidgeting and weight bearing, and it's really, so everyone understands, about getting your body above 1.5 metabolic equivalents. That's what we found. It's not sitting versus standing. It's moving versus not moving, weight bearing versus not. And so if you aggregate the walking plus all the physical not sitting that Juliet's doing, it really ends up adding up.
Yeah. And we even did this thing where we have sort of from our house to the end of the block, we actually measured it one time at 1,750 steps. And we often walk that 1,750 steps after dinner. Because we do have time then, and most people have time then. It probably takes us, what does it take us? 15 minutes. The whole thing takes us 15 minutes. And it usually is just the amount we need to kind of put us over the edge, right? We do these little like 10-minute walks after we eat, maybe take a walking meeting, maybe I walk afterwards. And, often, and then just with all the kind of random walking you're doing throughout the day, I'm usually at like 6, maybe 7,000 steps. And that one little 1,750 step walk is just enough to put me over the edge. And it's not a huge time commitment. And then it has the side benefit of I feel better after I've eaten.
Gotten some fresh air. We've seen the neighbors.
Fresh air. We've said hello to our neighbors, connected with some humans. And even those little things, like it sounds so dumb when you see it, but like get to Costco and park farthest away. It's good for your mental health. You get a few extra steps as you're walking around Costco. I mean, it's those kinds of things that, like, again, on any given day isn't going to change your life. But if you, aggregate those over weeks and months and a lifetime, like it's a massive amount of additional movement.
And let me just take this out of the perception of things people don't care about. You don't care about living forever. You don't. You think today I'm going to live forever. It's going to be like today. You should care about how much more ice cream you can eat. This is what I care about. And if I notice that if I train really hard and eat decently and move my body, I can eat so much more ice cream and nothing changes. And I just, if you be like, let's put this into really, really clear terms of things people should care about. Ice cream.
Well, and it's funny because I wear an Oura ring and, that's how I track my stuff. And I just got one of those like year-end recap things, that's kind of like funny to look at. And it's like, you, Juliet, and I've only had the Oura ring since September or something, but it's like, you've walked 1,250,000, some like insane amount of steps. And then it's like, that's the equivalent of running 20 marathons. And when I saw that piece of data, all I did was think of Kelly, because I was like, how much ice cream could Kelly eat in exchange
marathons
for that many marathons? It's a lot of ice cream.
You're welcome.
That is a lot of ice cream.
It's not ice cream, it's cookies. Just so
he likes cookies.
Oh, how about ice cream sandwiches?
Sure.
With cookies.
Loves them.
I don't
Loves them.
Okay. Equal opportunity ice cream eater. Recently I was talking about this on my Instagram story, so it's top of mind. I didn't start really walking purposefully until April of 2021.
Yeah.
And I started with 15 minutes at a time. That was my goal. It was like we kind of get to know the neighborhood, like go around this block and this block. And so 15 minutes. And it's taken me almost 2 years to even just sort of like figure out my day and like, where can I really squeak it in here and there. And now I'm, probably between 5 and 8 on most days. And it's just taken time. And I feel like, again, people hear those like big numbers and they're like, oh my gosh, they start stressing out about these things that we're supposed to be doing that are good for us.
Right.
I was going to say too, oftentimes after dinner, Z and I will walk together. We live obviously in the same house. We work in the same space that we live. He works from home. I work from home. We're together a lot, but we're not always communicating in that time. And then if we, sit down and watch a show or something, or sometimes watching separate shows, we're not really connecting, right? And so that sort of after dinner time, even if it's a short 15-minute, 20-minute walk, we get to sit and talk about the day, or not sit, walk and talk about the day. And that's just kind of a nice thing too, is like, if you do have family, if you are trying to connect with people, like that's a really great time to do that as well. And
here,
build two things into one. So
yeah. And I think it just goes back to that, like, good for you for just, trying to work it out. And that's our, again, like we've said, great, get 8 to 10,000 steps. And what we really mean by that is, man, like never do nothing, like get out there. And, and I just, again, like Kelly said, I was on this work trip and I did not have any opportunity to move. And I probably got 5,000 steps or 4,000 steps a day. I mean, limited opportunity to move. And, I just, I'm not going to beat myself up about it.
You did walk though from the hotel to the site.
I mean, I could either take this little shuttle from the hotel to the meeting place. And I just chose to walk. It was like a 9-minute walk, but I just, made these little mini choices. And again, it was just all from the frame of never do nothing. And also, now I'm home and I can sort of get back on my game and, restart the process again. So it's about like giving myself a little grace, knowing that I, live a busy life and so does everybody else.
100%.
And you're so tolerant. Your body is so tolerant. And so if you just start to give it the right things or different inputs or expand your inputs, you'll be shocked at what your body will do for you. I think you're not in a hurry. This is not emergency, but what you'll find is that, wow, I was able, sitting on the ground and watching TV tonight. The last takeaway, please, if you're just watching TV tonight, just sit on the ground in front of your couch. That's all. And when you need to fidget. When you need to sit differently, and you'll be shocked what that does for the range of motion in your hips and how better you feel.
The other thing I'll say just on this walking thing, that I recently just read an article in the New York Times called The Power of the 8-Minute Phone Call. And the sort of premise of the article was that, even though in many ways we're like more connected than we've ever been, and we're all on social media, that we're obviously actually disconnected. And we've all been trained because of robocalls and spam to never answer our phones. So like the phone is just sort of this peripheral thing on our phone. We're not really using the phone very much, the phone part. And it was just, this whole article was just about the power of like, hey, taking these 8, like something about 8 minutes. I don't know why they chose 8 minutes, but something about 8 minutes, calling, your friends and people you haven't connected with a while, or your family members, and just having a short 8-minute phone call. And so that's another thing that I've been doing where I'm trying to stack these behaviors is, I just go out and go for a 10-minute walk and like check in with my old friends. And it's actually been like, really like, have had this really lovely experience of feeling connected to people that, yeah, I saw their photo on Instagram and saw that what they did for Christmas, but like, that's not really true connection, right? I've actually had this opportunity to like use that little 8-minute phone call as a way to get a few steps in and connect with some people. So it's like a double awesome situation.
I love that. So tell me about where can we find the book? When exactly is it going to be out in the world? And all of those technical details, we'll make sure we get them in the show notes.
Oh, sure. It's coming out on April 4th, 2023. So very soon, depending on when you're listening to this or already out. People can learn more about it and buy it from a variety of places at builttomove.com. But it's available everywhere where, people buy books. It's also available in audiobook. Kelly and I are huge fans of audiobooks, so it's available in audiobook. So anywhere you buy books, including brick and mortar retailers, or just go to builttomove.com.
Amazing. Last question. How excited are we for the second installment of Dune?
You have no idea. Basically, when it made enough money to warrant a second movie, Kelly was like, I now have a reason for living. That's how serious it is for him.
Here's the deal. We have a huge Halloween party every year where our neighborhood is the hood. So we have 3,000 to 5,000 people in front of our house going up and down the street. We put a keg of beer out and we have a huge cosplay thing that happens. We have a DJ in our garage, Squid Games. What did we do last year? Stranger Things.
Yeah.
We have dolls hanging. Like, our street goes all in. But I really am struggling not to bring in 20,000 pounds of sand into my driveway.
He actually, like, in his spare time, he thinks about how could he bring in like many truckloads of sand and contain the sand and be able to use it for this party and then still be able to remove all the sand later. So, it's a conundrum. Maybe one of your listeners is like, has an idea.
Everybody, we're going to start training with sandbags. So buy your sandbag and then head over to Kelly and Juliet's house and fill your sandbag for free.
Yeah, exactly. Like free sand.
Yeah. Here you go. Free sand.
So we are really excited. Thank you for asking.
June 2023 at our house.
Thank you for, I always tell everyone, I'm like, if you really want to understand Kelly Starrett, you will read Dune.
Yeah.
So thank you for seeing him.
Yeah. WOD. Well, this has been such a joy to be able to connect with you all. I'm so just excited that this book is coming out. I think it's going to be a wonderful thing for coaches as well. I'm thinking about all my fellow fitness and nutrition coaches. Like, if you really want to get just like the most fundamental things into people's hands, give them that manual for
quickly
life.
Yeah. Then you can actually get to the things you want to coach and
Absolutely.
talk about. You don't have to do these other things. You're like, cover this.
Yeah.
You're a physician or physical therapist, do this, and then talk to me. We'll talk about your deadlift.
Yeah, it's great. So congrats on the book, and hopefully we can connect sometime soon in person again. It's been too long.
Way too long. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Thanks.